The subject's endurance test concluded at the 22-minute mark. Quileth noted the time, cross-referenced it against the index's mammalian primate benchmarks, and felt the mild, familiar satisfaction of a hypothesis confirmed. 22 minutes was decent for a biped with an oxygen-dependent respiratory system and no musculoskeletal augmentation. It was not remarkable. Nothing about specimen designation H1 had been remarkable. She adjusted the observation lens and watched the human, Sam Nakamura, 35 years old, cargo logistics coordinator, captured from a colony transport in the Proxima Drift, step off the treadmill equivalent and grip his knees with both hands. He was breathing hard. His skin had flushed a deep pink along the neck and chest, the capillary network expanding to shed excess heat in the way of most warm-blooded organisms. His heart rate, displayed on the biometric panel to Quileth's left, read 178 beats per minute. It would return to baseline. She checked her notes, 72 beats per minute within approximately 4 minutes. All of it predictable, all of it catalogued. Quileth's neural network glowed with the calm, steady blue pulse her colleagues associated with routine documentation. She had seen this exact sequence, exertion, flush, recovery, in 43 warm-blooded species. Species 341 was offering no surprises. Ven, her youngest research assistant, was in the testing chamber with the human, administering the battery protocols in person as the training guidelines required. He was 23 years old and had indexed precisely 0 species on his own. His neural glow was a brighter, more erratic blue than Quileth's. The signature of a young Selenari still calibrating his capacity to process new biological data without visible reaction. He was, Quileth noted with mild affection, doing well. He had not flinched when the human made an incomprehensible noise during the pain tolerance test. He had maintained professional composure throughout, even when the translator flagged the human's muttered comments as probable profanity. Syntactic category unclear. The pain tolerance results had been logged 3 hours earlier. Graduated electrical stimulation to the peripheral nervous system, a standard protocol refined over 2 centuries of comparative biology. Most species reached their cessation threshold between level 3 and level 5. Level 3 corresponded to the neural equivalent of what the index catalogued as significant discomfort. Level 5 was acute pain, voluntary cessation expected. Level 8 and above began producing involuntary responses. Muscle spasm, loss of postural control, vocalization. The Korathi, the galaxy's most physically durable indexed sapient, averaged level 6 before requesting cessation. The Thisari, whose nervous systems processed pain signals with extreme sensitivity, averaged level 2. Sam Nakamura had reached level 4, made a noise that Quileth's translator rendered as, "Okay, that is definitely enough of that," and politely indicated he would prefer to stop. Level 4 was the median for mammalian primates, right down the middle of the distribution. Exactly where the model predicted him to be, the cognitive battery had produced similar results. Pattern recognition, above the Tier 3, mean by 11%. Spatial reasoning, average. Sequential memory, above average but within 1 standard deviation. The human's brain was a capable instrument. Complex prefrontal cortex, well-developed language centers, clear evidence of abstract reasoning. But Quileth had indexed 3 other species with superior cognitive profiles in the Tier 3 classification alone. The Morbathi, the Yeskin, and the Viridian Collective all outperformed Homo sapiens on standardized cognitive assessment. The human's mind was good. It was not the best she had seen at this tier. It was not close. After the treadmill, Ven offered Sam Nakamura a hydration solution and asked the standard post-exertion questions. The human drank the solution in 3 long swallows, set the container down, and asked. Quileth checked the translation log, whether there was coffee on this station. Ven had looked at him with the characteristic wide-eyed confusion of a young Selenari encountering an unknown cultural referent and asked what coffee was. Sam Nakamura had stared at him for a moment that stretched just slightly past comfortable and said, "Never mind, it's a whole thing." Then he asked if he could sit down. Ven had shown him to the rest quarters. Quileth reviewed the translation log for the 3rd time and confirmed that the phrase, "it's a whole thing," was not translatable using any of the collective's 847 registered language matrices. She filed it under idiomatic expressions, function unclear, and moved on. The holding room was not a cell. Quileth wanted to be precise about this. In her own internal record-keeping, the Selenari Research Collective did not cage specimens. They provided comfortable accommodations with temperature control, adequate lighting, and a variety of dietary options calibrated to the species' known nutritional requirements. Sam Nakamura's room had a sleeping surface, a seating area, a functional sanitation unit, and a one-way observation window through which Quileth could monitor him between test sessions. The room was pleasant by any reasonable standard. He paced it in exactly 40 minutes. She observed him through the window for the better part of an hour, between the cognitive battery and the scheduled baseline scan the following morning. He paced. He examined the walls. He sat on the bed, bounced on it twice in what she classified as a texture assessment behavior, and stared at the ceiling with his hands folded on his chest. He did what appeared to be a push-up exercise, poorly, abandoning the attempt after 15 repetitions. He talked to himself in a low, continuous murmur that the room's audio sensors captured, but the translator struggled to parse. She caught fragments, a name that appeared to be potato, references to a communication device he wanted access to, a question about the feeding schedule of an unspecified animal. At one point, he addressed the observation window directly, not knowing what it was, simply intuiting that something was watching, and said, "If anyone can hear me, I would really like to contact someone. I have a dog. His name is Potato. He eats at 6 in the morning and 6 in the evening, and if someone doesn't go home and feed him in the next 12 hours, he is going to lose his mind." Quileth noted the attachment to a non-sapient, companion animal. She noted the social isolation response, the continuous low-level vocalization, the restless movement, the seeking behavior directed at walls and windows. She cross-referenced it against the index's behavioral profiles for pack-bonded species under separation stress. It matched the pattern well. Humans, she recorded, were highly social organisms who displayed measurable distress when removed from their social networks. Predictable. Expected. Filed under behavioral quirks. Evolutionary origin, cooperative survival strategy, practical relevance, minimal. She did not file it under anything that might have warned her. She had no framework for what she was about to learn. None of her 340 previous index entries had given her one. The morning of the second day, she ran the comprehensive biometric scan herself. Quileth had performed this scan on 56 species personally. She found it the most satisfying part of her work. The moment when the biological picture became complete, when every organ and system and chemical process was laid out in data she could examine and understand. The scan stripped the extraordinary complexity of living organisms down to legible architecture. She loved it the way some Selenari loved mathematics, for the clarity of it. Sam Nakamura sat in the scanning array and was cooperative. His heart, a single-chamber pump, adequate, nothing elegant. Respiratory, bilateral lungs, oxygen-dependent, roughly 70% efficiency under exertion. Musculature, striated fiber, moderate density, the kind of tissue that fatigued predictably. His neurological system was the most interesting component. The prefrontal cortex showed dense connectivity she associated with complex reasoning. A good brain, capable, though she'd catalogued better. She mapped the endocrine system last. Standard mammalian array, unremarkable. She reached the adrenal glands and spent perhaps 30 seconds on them. Two small organs above the kidneys, trace cortisol and adrenaline output. Architecture consistent with 17 comparable mammalian species in the index. She classified them as minor endocrine regulators. Ambient stress management function, no exceptional output capacity, and moved on. She had just examined the most dangerous biological system in the galaxy and classified it as unremarkable. The error would take her 6 days to fully understand, and several more weeks before she stopped waking in the low hours of the station cycle with her neural glow dim and her hands pressed flat against the sleeping surface. Reminding herself the blast doors were sealed, she was 2 paragraphs into the preliminary index entry when the alarm sounded. It was a sound she had heard in drills, a rising 2-tone sequence, sharp and insistent, designed to cut through concentration without triggering the Selenari biological fear response, which, given the fragility of Selenari psychology under stress, the collective's safety engineers had worked hard to avoid. The alarm was designed to be noticed, not to frighten. It failed in this instance. Quileth's neural glow spiked to white confusion so rapidly her own reflection in the observation window showed it. Her hands left the documentation panel. The announcement followed the alarm by approximately 2 seconds, the laboratory's emergency system speaking in the calm, measured cadence it was programmed to use regardless of the content of what it was saying. Containment failure, Laboratory 7C, specimen, Vraxian Mahler, Category 5. Emergency lockdown engaged. All personnel in Section 7 remain in current positions. Emergency response teams are being assembled. The blast doors sealed. Quileth did not move for 3 seconds. Her analytical mind, which she had spent 90 years training into an instrument of extraordinary precision, ran the calculation automatically without her consciously directing it. The sealed section contained laboratories 7A through 7D, the connecting corridors, the holding quarters, and the specimen storage areas. Her current position was 7A. Ben was in 7A. Milo and Sarah, her other 2 assistants, were in 7A. Sam Nakamura was in his holding quarters, connected to 7A by the observation corridor. The Vraxian Mahler was somewhere in that section with them. She knew the Mahler specifications without having to reference the files. She had written part of its index entry herself. It was a Category 5 organism by the Collective's threat classification system, which topped out at Category 5. Quadrupedal, approximately 180 kilograms, armored plating along the dorsal surface and jaw assembly. Jaw strength sufficient to crush the structural supports in standard laboratory furniture. Forward-facing compound eyes optimized for motion detection. Pursuit speed measured at approximately 3 times the maximum sprint velocity of any Selenari. It was used for comparative threat assessment, a biological benchmark against which other predatory species could be measured. It was the most dangerous organism the collective had ever chosen to study at close range, and the containment protocols surrounding it were the most stringent in the facility. They had apparently not been stringent enough. Quileth heard it. Even before she consciously registered the sound, her body responded. Her single heart rate spiked. Her neural glow dropped from white to a dim, uncertain flicker, and her hands developed the fine tremor that her colleagues had learned to interpret as system error. She had experienced genuine fear perhaps twice in her life. She had always understood it, abstractly, as a biological state her species had largely evolved past. The Selenari had survived by being too intelligent to find themselves in dangerous situations, not by being equipped to survive them. Fear, for a Selenari, was mostly theoretical. The sound from Laboratory 7B, one room away, separated by a reinforced panel that suddenly seemed very thin, was not theoretical. It was a rhythmic, heavy impact, something large, testing surfaces, something that had been confined and was now not confined and was working its way through the available space, then had gone completely still in the corner nearest Quileth. His neural glow was out, not dim, absent. Quileth had never seen a Selenari's glow go fully dark before. She understood, looking at him, that this was what their species' fear response actually looked like, a complete suspension of conscious activity, the mind shutting down non-essential processes, producing something that looked distressingly like catatonia. Milo, across the room, had pressed himself flat against the far wall and appeared to be running the same calculation Quileth had already run, and arriving at the same answer. Sarah had moved to the equipment console, was checking whether any of the laboratory's instruments could be used as a barrier or a signal device. It was a reasonable response. Quileth found herself profoundly grateful for it. From his holding quarters, she heard Sam Nakamura move. She turned to the corridor observation camera out of reflex, the monitoring habit of 90 years asserting itself over everything else, and she watched something happen that her training had given her no framework for. He heard the alarm. His head came up. His posture shifted, spine straightening, shoulders pulling back, weight redistributing to the balls of his feet. These were postural changes. She had seen postural changes in threatened organisms hundreds of times. What came next was not postural. His pupils expanded until the dark center consumed nearly the entire visible iris. A sympathetic nervous system response she recognized from her files as mydriasis, threat response associated. His skin flushed and then, over the following 4 seconds, the flush deepened and changed character. This was not exertion heat dissipation. This was vasodilation, blood routing, vascular priority shifting away from the extremities and toward the large muscle groups. His heart rate on the biometric display jumped in a single interval from 72 to 148. The respiratory counter doubled and then tripled its cycle. She watched his musculature change, not flexing, not posturing, but loading, every major muscle group in his body tightening simultaneously, like a mechanical system under pressure, like something being wound. And her analytical vision, the close-range cellular acuity that was the finest instrument her species possessed, showed her what was happening underneath. His adrenal glands, those small, unremarkable organs she had spent 30 seconds classifying and moved past, they were not dormant anymore. They were erupting. The adrenaline output on her sensors climbed past the reference range, past the maximum she had recorded for any mammalian species in the index, past the level her instruments labeled potentially lethal cardiac event, and kept climbing. The noradrenaline cascade followed a half-second later. His bloodstream was being chemically rewritten in real time. His liver was dumping glycogen reserves at a rate her instruments flagged as emergency metabolic response, unsustainable. His pain receptors. She could see the neural pathway activity, the suppressive endorphin network lighting up like a separate system being switched on, were going dark, not diminished, dark. His brain was not receiving pain signals. They were being blocked at the neurological routing level, as though some part of his biology had decided, unilaterally and without his conscious input, that pain information was irrelevant data. She had catalogued 340 species. She had seen stress responses. She had documented adrenaline analogs in 63 different organisms. She had never, not once, seen a biological system voluntarily override its own operational parameters in real time. Not a mechanism, not a drug, not an augmentation. His own body, using tools that had been sitting dormant inside him when she measured them, had rewritten what he was. She was looking at a different organism than the one she had scanned this morning. Her neural glow blazed to a brightness her assistants had never seen from her. White, sustained, blazing, every pathway firing simultaneously, the visible equivalent of the system receiving more data than it could process at once. Her hands, gripping the console edge, were shaking so hard the biometric panel registered a tremor alert. The mauler hit the door to Laboratory 7A. The reinforced panel deformed inward, not catastrophically but visibly, the hinges taking the stress and partially failing. Milo made a sound that Quileth's translator declined to process. Syrah, thrown backward by the impact shockwave, caught the edge of the console on the way down and hit the floor with blood already coming from a cut above her eye. Ven remained frozen. Quileth remained frozen. The mauler hit the door again. The creak of metal under load filled the room with a frequency that resonated uncomfortably with the hollow bone structure every Selenari shared. One more impact and the door was through. From the observation corridor, something hit the door on the other side. It took Quileth a full second to process what she was seeing on the corridor camera. Sam Nakamura was hitting the door with his shoulder, not testing it, striking it. Deliberately, repeatedly, at a tempo that her medical knowledge told her should be shattering his clavicle on the second or third impact. He was not slowing down. His pain receptors were dark. The door had been designed to contain a Selenari. Selenari massed 25 to 35 kilograms and had hollow bones. The emergency engineering team had not anticipated sustained battering force from a mammal whose body had stopped consulting him about injury. On the fourth impact, the locking mechanism yielded. The door to Lab 7A came open at the same moment the mauler broke through from 7B. Sam Nakamura stood in the doorway with both injuries sustained from breaking through it already written in the way he held himself. Slightly awkward at the shoulder, but his face showing nothing. That registered on the emotional classification scale Quileth used for sapient expressions. His eyes were fully dilated. His expression was not fear. It was not anger. It was the absence of all the processing that produced fear and anger. It was focus rendered absolute, cognition narrowed to a blade. He saw the mauler. He saw the 4 Selenari. He looked at the chair beside him. He picked it up. He charged a Category 5 predator with the chair. Quileth had spent her career believing that sapient cognition represented the highest evolutionary achievement in the known galaxy, that the ability to think, to reason, to model consequences was the apex of biological possibility. She watched Sam Nakamura charge a Vraxian mauler with a chair, and she understood, with the totality of her analytical capability suddenly directed at this single moment, that she had been operating with an incomplete dataset. The chair connected with the mauler's head. It shattered. The mauler staggered, not from damage but from surprise. Nothing in this laboratory had ever attacked it. It hesitated for 1.4 seconds, and Sam used that window to assess what he was holding, which was now a broken chair leg roughly 60 centimeters long, and adjust his grip. The mauler recovered. It charged. He moved left, a dodge close enough to failure that the jaw snapped shut on air that had contained his torso, 4 seconds earlier. In the same motion, he drove the chair leg into the gap between the mauler's armored neck plates, found something soft, and pushed. The creature screamed. The charge redirected. Sam stepped with the deflection rather than away from it, using the creature's own momentum to stay clear of the secondary strike. Her analytical vision read the neurological activity through his skin, the way a Selenari reads another's thoughts. And what she saw was not planning. No prefrontal deliberation. His motor cortex was operating on patterns laid down long before reasoning existed. His body knew things his mind hadn't been consulted about. The mauler's limb connected with his ribs on the backswing. She heard the crack, 2 fractured ribs, minimum. The kind of impact that would put a Selenari into medical shutdown. Sam took 1 step sideways to rebalance, placed himself between the mauler and the cluster of Selenari against the wall, and did not slow down. His positioning was automatic, ancient, a behavioral pattern his species had been executing for 2 million years on a planet that no longer required it. He was a cargo coordinator from a colony station. He was also, underneath all of that, a social mammal whose body understood one irreducible imperative. Something dangerous is near people who cannot protect themselves. The mauler feinted left and crashed right. Sam, reading motion rather than intention, shifted to cover the feint and caught the real charge partially. The mauler's forelimb clawed across his thigh as it drove past him and went for Ven. She saw the wound open, saw the blood. Sam, from his knees, he'd gone down from the impact, drove the chair leg upward into the underside of the mauler's jaw, with the full weight of both arms and every remaining gram of adrenaline charged. Shoulder strength. The wood cracked. One of the mauler's teeth cracked with it. The creature recoiled. Sam used the 2-second window in a way that Quileth's mind, even in this state, flagged as extraordinary. He did not use it to retreat. He grabbed Ven, 30 kilograms of frozen, barely conscious young Selenari, and he threw him, into the observation corridor. 5 meters. Ven landed hard, rolled, and was alive and out of the room. Sam got up. His left leg took his weight with visible difficulty, the torn tissue in his thigh communicating something to his nervous system that was being partially suppressed and partially ignored through what appeared to be the sheer quantity of chemistry currently managing him. He crossed the room in a limping lunge, picked up Sarah from the floor, one arm under her unconscious body, the other still holding the chair leg, as though releasing it was simply not an option. His hands were considering, and carried her to the corridor. He went back. Milo was curled against the wall where the mauler had last circled, his neural glow completely absent. His body in the complete shutdown that Quileth was beginning to understand was the absolute limit of Selenari biological response to mortal fear. Sam grabbed him by the arm, dragged him across the floor, deposited him beside Ven in the corridor with a care that her translator would later flag as incongruous with his current biochemical state, and turned back to face the mauler. He turned back. Quileth was the last one in the room. She had not moved. She understood that she had not moved. Her body had not given her a route out of this situation, and her mind, for the first time in 90 years of analytical practice, had stopped producing outputs. She was watching something that had no entry in the grand biological index, no reference point, no classification framework. Sam looked at her. His eyes were black, his face was running with sweat, his thigh was bleeding through the material of his clothing, and he held a stick in both hands. He said 4 words. Her translator rendered them with perfect clarity in zero point 0.2 seconds. Move, now, behind me. She moved. She passed behind him. She passed close enough to him that she felt the heat radiating from his body, not the warmth of standard mammalian thermoregulation, but the fever heat of a metabolic system burning at a rate that had set aside the organism's long-term health for the sake of the next 60 seconds. She reached the corridor. She turned, Sam back toward her, never facing away from the mauler, the chair leg raised, and she had a moment, a single, suspended moment, to observe both of them from outside the immediate terror of the situation. The mauler was a Category 5 organism, the most dangerous thing in the collective's inventory. A predator engineered by millions of years of evolution for exactly one function, and the cargo coordinator from the colony station was standing between it and the corridor, bleeding, with broken ribs and a ruined thigh, and the mauler was not charging. It was circling, because something in its predatory assessment had flagged this specific prey as a threat level it did not have a behavioral response to. The mauler charged the corridor entrance. Sam did not move back. He moved forward into the charge and dropped as the jaw descended, driving himself under it, driving the chair leg up into the soft tissue beneath the jaw assembly with both hands, using the full weight of his body from below to push the broken wood upward through the pallet. The mauler's momentum carried them both backward and down. The creature thrashed with the enormous, convulsive power of its full musculature in distress. Sam held on. She could see, from the corridor, his hands white on the wood, his body wrapped around the creature's neck with both legs, riding the convulsions. Her medical training told her the grip should fail in 10 seconds, in 15, in 20. His adrenaline body held for 43. She counted. The mauler stopped moving. Sam released. He rolled off the creature, crawled to the corridor wall, and sat down against it. And in the 4 seconds between when he sat down and when the emergency team began cutting through the blast door, she watched his biology reverse itself. The heart rate on her portable biometric. She was still holding it, she realized. The habit of documentation carrying her through the whole thing dropped from 164 to 91 in the space of 3 breaths. His musculature, which had been loaded and vibrating with sustained tension for 8 minutes, released simultaneously. He slumped. His skin, which had been flushed red-hot, began to cool. At his pain receptors, those blocked pathways that suppressed network came back online. She knew the exact moment it happened because his face changed completely. Every injury, every fracture, every torn tissue and burned nerve that his body had accumulated in the last 8 minutes arrived at his brain all at once, because that was when his body had determined that the threat was finished, and therefore pain was information again. He made a sound that her translator categorized as involuntary vocalization, ambiguous emotional valence, possible simultaneous laughter and distress. His hands, which had been perfectly steady through the entire encounter, began to shake. His breathing went ragged. He looked at the dead mauler. He looked at the 4 Selenari against the wall. He looked at Quileth, who was standing 2 meters away holding a biometric scanner, and whose neural glow was so bright it was probably visible through the corridor walls. He said, "Someone want to tell me where the hell I am?" A pause. He looked at the mauler again. And what the hell was that thing? The blast door opened. Emergency response personnel with containment equipment came through and stopped when they saw the mauler. Their team leader looked at the mauler, looked at Sam Nakamura sitting against the wall holding a splintered piece of furniture, and made a sound that Quileth's translator rendered as a vocalization indicating disbelief without a precise lexical equivalent. Sam looked up at the response team and then looked at his own hands, as though surprised by their shaking. He was not a super soldier. He was a cargo coordinator who was beginning to understand what his body had just done, now that his body was no longer managing the experience for him, and the understanding was arriving in waves, each one hitting his face in sequence. The inventory of pain, the memory of the mauler's jaw closing on air where he had been, the weight of Sarah in his arms, the sound the mauler made when the chair leg found the gap in the plates. The chemistry had protected him from all of it. And now the chemistry was gone and reality had a backlog to deliver. He said, "I need to sit down," despite the fact that he was already sitting down. Then he closed his eyes. Quileth spent 6 days rewriting the index entry. She deleted the original draft in its entirety on the first morning. She pulled the biometric recordings from the breach event and reviewed them 47 times. On each review, she found something new: the speed of the adrenal cascade, the specific hormone ratios, the way his brain had prioritized threat processing over pain reception, the way his cardiovascular system had sustained operation in ranges her instruments classified as critical for 8 minutes without failure. 902 species in the Grand Biological Index. Not one had an equivalent system. Some had stress responses. Some produced adrenaline analogs. None had a biological override mechanism that converted an unremarkable individual into a temporarily enhanced combat organism automatically, involuntarily, triggered not by decision but by perception. She understood the trigger on the 4th day, reviewing the sequence for the 19th time. Sam had not transformed during the tests. He had tolerated level 4 electrical stimulation and asked politely to stop. He had not transformed when the alarm sounded and he was alone in his room with the knowledge that something dangerous was nearby. The biological override had activated at the moment the Mauler hit the door to 7A, the moment the threat became immediate and located and pointed at others, not personal survival. The trigger was the specific combination of present danger and the presence of others who could not protect themselves. 2 million years of cooperative social survival compressed into 2 small glands. She contacted the Collective's Strategic Assessment Division on the 5th day. She stood at the front of a room containing some of the most analytically capable minds in the Collective's research structure and showed them Sam Nakamura's biometric data. She showed them the treadmill results. 22 minutes? Tier 3 average. And then the readings from Laboratory 7A. The adrenaline cascade. The pain suppression. A human being outperforming the highest values in the Grand Biological Index across 12 physiological parameters simultaneously. She showed them the original index entry she had nearly finalized. Tier 3. Low threat. No notable biological advantages. Then she told them about Earth. 10 billion humans. Sam Nakamura's test results exactly average for his species. The survey expedition's plan, specimen capture, biological census, standard procedure. She explained what specimen capture required. She explained what frightening 10 billion humans would look like in light of what she had observed in 8 minutes in a sealed laboratory. The room was quiet for a long time. The survey expedition to Earth was canceled, permanently, filed under species posing unacceptable risk-to-benefit ratio for standard assessment protocols. The entry was unprecedented in the Collective's history. No species had ever been classified as too dangerous to study using the standard approach before a single survey had been conducted. Quileth returned to her documentation suite and wrote the final version of humanity's index entry. It was the shortest entry in the Grand Biological Index, 209 words, including the addendum. 90 years of research. 341 species. She had never once written the word terrifying in a scientific document. She wrote it now. The entry read, Classification, Tier 3, resting. Tier 1, activated, do not activate. Activation threshold is remarkably low. Threat to individuals in the organism's social proximity, personal danger, or sufficient emotional distress can trigger full biological override. This species does not have a combat mode. It has a second form. The baseline measurements are not the organism. They are the organism at rest. The organism at rest is average. The organism activated is unclassifiable by current index parameters. Do not approach with standard capture protocols. Do not frighten. Do not threaten individuals in their social group. Do not allow them to perceive others as endangered. Treat all 10 billion as continuously loaded, because they are. The personal addendum followed. I have indexed 341 species. I have never encountered a biological system I could not classify until this one. I watched an average human kill a Vraxian mauler with a piece of furniture to protect 4 beings who had spent the previous day running electrical current to his nervous system. When I asked him afterward why he did it, he said he didn't think about it. His body did it. He sounded surprised. He should not have been. His species has been doing it for 2 million years. They are not dangerous because they have exceptional members. They are dangerous because they don't. Their most ordinary individual, placed under the right conditions, becomes something our index cannot contain. I have reviewed the data 47 times. I remain unable to determine an upper bound for the activated state's capabilities. I am writing the word terrifying in a scientific document for the first time in 90 years of research. I want to be precise about why. It is not the Mahler. It is not the 8 minutes. It is that Sam Nakamura, on the transport home, asked whether anyone had fed his dog. He had broken ribs and a lacerated thigh and a Category 5 predator's blood on his hands, and his first coherent sentence was about a dog named Potato. The resting organism is indistinguishable from any unremarkable sapient. The resting organism does not know what it is. I find this, more than anything else I have recorded in this entry, to be the most important fact in the Grand Biological Index.